I can't deny that I hated Damian Smith. That was quite clear from the tape that was shown earlier. In any case, I made no secret of it.
No more than anyone else, apparently. We've heard testimony that Damian was loathed by many people, but what I'm interested in is how you formed your own personal opinion of him.
I was wary of him right from the beginning when I found out that he was Frank Smith's son.
And why was that?
Frank Smith was the reason that my husband and son and I had no real home for 10 years. We spent those years on the run in fear for our lives because Frank Smith vowed that he would have vengeance on us.
And what had you done to inspire such vengeance?
We testified against him when he was brought up on charges for federal racketeering, and we were responsible for his conviction and imprisonment.
And didn't you receive any help from the authorities from doing your civic duty?
No. Nothing. No one could save us from the wrath of Frank Smith.
But he was behind prison bars.
Only physically. His influence and his organization, his contacts were everywhere. We would try to establish new residence with new identities in a new country, in a new continent. We would try to build a life. But sooner or later, he would catch up with us, and we would have to run again.
What made you stop running?
The last time Frank Smith's men caught up with us, they killed a friend of ours. Mistakenly, intending to kill us, and we realized that we were not only endangering our own lives, but anyone who came into contact with us, and we were tired. We'd had it. Our son had no roots. We missed the people we loved and hadn't seen for many years, and we decided that we would come home. And if he was going to kill us, he'd have to do it in front of everyone in plain sight.
And so when you returned to Port Charles and found his son in residence, you were understandably concerned.
Yes. But even so, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it appeared that he was trying to live a normal life. But, it wasn't that long before we tangled over the toxic waste incinerator, and then I realized that he was every bit as ruthless and conniving as his father was.
There were other issues that you tangled with Damian Smith about, weren't there?
Yes. Damian deliberately tried to undermine my work at the Charles Street Foundation with his plans to build the CS Emporium. And then there was the matter of my son and Damian paying off his gambling debt, which he threw in our faces. He tried to use my son. And that is the reason for the outburst that you saw on the tape.
In which you threatened Damian with a baseball bat.
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Spencer, I want you to think back to that night. And I want you to remember that you've sworn to tell the truth here. If you had not been stopped, would you have, in fact, hit Damian Smith with that bat?
No. I wanted to, desperately. But I wouldn't have. I couldn't have.
This better be big, calling me out of here while my wife's on the stand.
Sorry, but I got called to Albany about the hearing for my predecessor. While I'm away, my guy will probably restore that videotape you gave me.
Hold it, Bubba. We had a deal to watch that thing together, but if you think I'm going to wait for you...
No, I don't. I know that if it affects the trial, we got to move on it fast. Just make damn sure you call me and tell me what's on it the minute you know.
Fine.
Mrs. Spencer, we would all like to know why it is that only your fingerprints are on the bat that was allegedly used to murder Damian Smith, when all of us saw your husband handle the bat on the videotape.
Maybe this couldn't be seen on the tape, but the bat was still shrink-wrapped that night at Luke's. The day that I went to the ward house, the day of the fire, the sports equipment was strewn all over the parlor, and I gathered it up and I put it to one side. And at that moment, I removed the shrink wrap.
And that's the last time you handled the bat that day?
Yes.
So that would mean anyone else who handled the bat, such as the person who actually murdered Damian Smith, would have had to been using gloves.
I assume so.
Okay, now, about the phone call that the phone records say you made to Damian Smith that day. Would you tell us about that conversation?
I called Damian Smith to tell him that we would be repaying our son's gambling debt.
That's it? That's all?
Yes.
Well, what was his response?
He taunted me a little more about not knowing about my son's whereabouts, and I didn't respond to it this time. I just told him we were paying the debt, and I hung up.
You didn't say that you wanted to see him and then arrange to meet him later on that night at Ward House?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, Miss Spencer, just a few more questions about the night of the fire. Did you at any time see or encounter Damian Smith at Ward House that night?
No, I did not.
And you were upstairs with the babies when the fire started?
Yes, I was.
Well, that must mean that someone else caught Damian in the act of starting the fire and killed him.
Yes, someone else must have, because I didn't do it. I did not kill Damian Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Spencer.
Your witness.
Is my wife beautiful or what? That was a good move, getting in the whole Frank Smith saga.
Well, I don't know. I don't like the vibe I'm getting from Dara. She didn't object one time, not even when she should have. She's gearing up for something.
Mrs. Spencer, you're obviously a very busy woman involved in a great many things.
Yes, I was, prior to this trial.
Well, forgetting for a moment the night of the murder, have you ever before been involved in any way with the death of another human being? I'll repeat the question. Have you ever been involved in any way with the death of another human being?
Your Honor, I object. This question is unduly prejudicial, and the prosecution is well aware of it.
Sidebar. The jury is dismissed. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Spencer to her seat.
That little stunt of yours has caused my client irreparable damage, and I don't appreciate it.
I was just raising the issue of Mrs. Spencer's credibility, Your Honor.
Let me go on record with this. The court will not be put in the position of having to declare a mistrial. Do you understand? You're treading on dangerous ground, Miss Jensen.
May I point out, Your Honor, that Miss Jensen's line of questioning does not, by any stretch of the imagination, substantiate the facts of this case.
I respectfully disagree, Your Honor. The question is not only relevant, but critical to establishing the defendant's credibility.
May I remind you, Miss Jensen, this issue has already been discussed in chambers, and the court made it clear that this line of questioning is indeed highly prejudicial.
Thank you.
However, you did open the door by placing the defendant on the stand, so you're not exempt from all responsibility.
That's correct, Your Honor. And the people never would have pursued this line of questioning had Mr. Ward not made that choice.
I could sustain the objection, have the question stricken from the record, and instruct the jury to disregard it.
Well, what good would that do, Your Honor? The damage has already been done.
Then what are you suggesting, Mr. Ward, that Ms. Jensen continue?
Well, I don't see as I have much of an alternative, Your Honor. Sure, you can strike it from the record, but the doubt is still hanging over that jury box.
You do realize you're taking a gamble.
I recognize the risks, Your Honor, but my client's case may very well hinge on her credibility, and I'm willing to roll the dice.
All right. I'll allow Miss Jensen to proceed cautiously, please.
Of course, Your Honor.
Bailiff, will you please bring the jury back and have Mrs. Spencer retake the stand? Thank you. Counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will repeat the question. Have you ever been involved in any way with the death of another human being?
Yes.
You were, in fact, responsible for the death of David Hamilton, weren't you?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Spencer was considered a youthful offender, and those records are sealed.
I'd respond by saying that story was covered by the press and is therefore a matter of public record.
Objection overruled. You may proceed.
And isn't it also true that you are responsible for the death of Robert Jackson?
Yes.
You did, in fact, shoot him in the back.
Yes, but Yes.
No further questions.
Redirect?
Oh, yes, Your Honor. Oh, yes.